Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to give it just one more minute to allow people to continue to join us, and we'll get started right away. So just be patient, and we'll start in maybe another 30 seconds. Thanks. Okay. I'm anxious to get going anyway. So I know Natasha and Martin, we've been bouncing this idea back and forth for a while. So I'm not known to wait much, and I'd love to just get this conversation started. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bruce Nichols. I'm a human resources and management consultant. I work with an organization called the Human Resources Consortium. And so one of the things that we see on the ground a lot of times is a lot of HR and talent acquisition teams. They're being pulled in all kinds of directions. They're going all over the place, and they're being told, let's adopt AI, let's do it faster, and let's shift to a skills-based platform. Let's shift to skills-based hiring. So doing that right or having it done right, they reinforce each other. Done wrong, it compounds the issue, it exacts the problem, makes it really hard to fix. So this whole game can be done in sequence, and that's what we're here to unpack and discuss today. So with me, I have two fantastic people that I think I would love to have in the room every single time that we're going through this type of transformation. So let's start with Natasha. Let's introduce yourself, and then we'll get started and move over to Martin.
All right, Bruce, that was very generous of you. Thank you. But the conversations have been good, so I might sign up for that being in the room. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you here. My name is Natasha Nuytten. Last name is much easier to pronounce than it looks. It's super Belgian. And I am the CEO and co-founder at CLARA. And we build skills-based hiring technology for small and mid-market companies to help them do precisely what we're talking about today. Just really hone in on what it is, but do it well and with intention, making sure that we're finding the right talent for the right moment in your organization and doing it with technology that's built equitably, intentionally, thoughtfully, and compliantly. So that's what we're here to do. And I'm really excited about talking about this process with you all today. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. And Martin.
Thank you so much. Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me into this conversation. Martin Redstone. I'm Head of Responsible AI at Warden AI. For those that haven't heard of Warden AI, we are a AI assurance platform. We work with HR tech vendors, with employers and staffing businesses on ensuring that the AI that they are building, developing and deploying is compliant, responsible and ethical by helping them to measure and audit bias risk within their system.
Thanks, Martin. And I'm going to try to keep us on track. And from an HR consulting perspective, our lens is always going to be on change and transformation and integration and make sure all these tools come together and support the strategy. So we're going to jump right into this, Natasha, with some things around and some thoughts around skills-based hiring. I've been in the room where we've talked about skills of the future, skills-based hiring, and every single time I leave the room and go to a different one, it means something different. So when you say it, what does that actually mean? And what are you actually measuring? And even a good resume, what's being missed there?
Yeah, those are all three really great questions. The first one is, I think it is a little bit like cooking, right? I'm a great cook. Does that mean you're good at following a recipe? Does that mean you're good at creating things out of thin air? I could drop you in the woods and you come back with something tasty. Skills-based hiring is very much the same in that regard. And so it doesn't just mean dropping degree requirements. It doesn't just mean putting a list of very basic sort of good communication skills type of thing. It means really thinking about where the organization is going, what you need for your exact team in this moment, and what you really need to be successful, right? So this is where aligning what TA and HR is doing with the organizational outcomes is so critically important. And so when we think about skills-based hiring, it starts really way upstream with kind of understanding that, and then making sure that we're getting aligned with the hiring manager and the other folks in the process around what are we specifically looking for, but we all have to be looking for the same thing, because skills-based hiring can break down so quickly, right? When we say, yeah, we get it, and then everyone's talking about something else. So creating that consistency around what we really need, and then being really transparent about it with our job advertisements or job descriptions that people are using, knowing those things are different, and then being able to use technology in a really thoughtful and intentional way to make sure that when we're auditing and assessing for those skills, that we're doing it in an inclusive, not exclusive type of way. And I think there's a rub there, right? Because when, as recruiters and HR managers, part of our job is narrowing the pool. So getting to the best applicants is really important. So it can sound really scary to say we're actually broadening the pool a little bit, but we want to broaden it because those transferable and adjacent skills are so important. And as technology is shifting right now, it matters. And so rather than just doing the sort of traditional coin flip, which is what most processes end up being, making sure that we're doing it really intentionally.
Yeah, such huge important points there, Natasha. Thanks. And Martin, I'm thinking about this. I just had a chat with somebody recently, and the comment back to me was, I'm going to integrate AI into my talent and my hiring process. And I said, why? And it was just a simple question. And then we had this long conversation from that. And we don't have enough time to divulge deep into that part. But when a leader comes to you and they say, let's just add AI to hiring, what's that question you'd wish they'd ask themselves and they do before they even touch a single tool?
Exactly that, Bruce. The first and most important question is why. And I think it's really interesting that AI seems to be looked at as some kind of like magical solution that's completely different to every single other technology transformation or change project that we go through, or we've seen over the last 2+ decades that I've been in the industry for. And so it has to start with why. What are you trying to fix? What are you trying to improve? What are you trying to achieve? What metrics are you looking at? What's the business case? Where's the ROI coming from? All those really strategic questions that you will get asked at any kind of board level that is giving you oversight on this and wanting to write a check, but has to know why. And yeah, so that's the most important question is, why? What are you trying to achieve?
Awesome. Yeah. So, Natasha, as we dig into this a little bit more, some of the things I've heard you say, and you've argued that the skills that matter most now are critical thinking and learning agility and adaptability. Why those? Why now? What's changed through this?
Yeah, that's a really great question because I don't know if anything has changed. I think it's just become more blatantly obvious in that
Yeah.
it is not necessary. There's so much that can be learned, right? And it can be learned on the job. We know that. Technology is shifting so fast that what it has done is amplify the need for us to identify talent that is just beyond what the last person hired me to do in their company, which is what a resume tells me, right? It doesn't tell you what I can do. It tells me what Bruce Nichols needed me to do in his organization. And so we really need to be more thoughtful about, as our jobs are changing, as our companies are changing, we need to be thinking about how do we bring people into the organization and assess for that around people who can take old information and apply it in a new situation, because this is a new situation, right? How can we people take new information and apply it to things that they've done in the past? And so that adaptability, that proactivity and learning, the ability to think for themselves and parse information becomes much more important. And so I really think that those skills are really transformative right now and really important, because I think the research shows that by 2030, 40% maybe of our jobs, of the core responsibilities that we have today, are not going to be the things that we're doing. So if we want people to change with us and grow with us in our organizations, we need to be looking for folks who can make that shift with us and who can help drive it in a really thoughtful and intentional way that drives business outcomes.
Awesome. Yeah, Martin, I saw you nodding, and we're both in the, and I feel bad, but I'm going to put you on the spot because I see you grinning through this. And so, what do you think? What else is inside of that from a critical thinking, learning agility? Why those skills from your perspective?
Look, in this new age of AI, what we're seeing is an outsourcing of most of these critical skills, and not in a good way. One of the things that we talk about in AI governance is the ability to still question the output of AI. And I think that we're unfortunately seeing a massive risk in our world and in all the other industries that are out there in something called automation bias, which is where ultimately people are seeing the output from an AI tool like ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude or whatever they're a plethora of them out there. None are my favorites. And they go, oh, I have to trust it. It's a computer. And unfortunately, that's why skills like critical thinking are so important nowadays, because when we get to that point of saying, I'm just going to trust it because it's a computer, we get to the point of all these horrible sci-fi films that we see around the dangers of AI, Matrix, Terminator, Wall-E, all those kind of things. And unfortunately, that is the world that we're looking at if we start losing some of these critical human skills where we just accept things because a computer told us. So yeah, so that's why I'm nodding along and smiling, because it's critical to good AI governance that we're still able to question the output of AI and use that critical thinking.
Awesome. So, Natasha, let's be a little concrete then too with this. And what strong candidate does keyword matching filter out? What's the weak one? How does it wave it through? Give us some thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's to start with our knowledge, like ATSs and search, like their job was process automation, not talent identification, right? They were there to, okay, let me help you work through this really quickly. Let me email these people, let me help you do scheduling, et cetera. And that's important, right? Because it helps us do the human parts of our work and focus on that versus some of the more tedious tasks. But the reality is that because they were not built for talent assessment, they were built to be, they're a little bit like the caloric monsters in our brain. Like it's process automation, it is pattern recognition. And so, unfortunately, what that does is it filters out people who maybe have adjacent experiences. So, keywords are really great at finding someone who's had this traditional path, who's taken all the steps and had all the right titles and gone to all the right schools and et cetera, et cetera. What it isn't great at is identifying somebody who's maybe come to their role circuitously, or they've gone sideways on the ladder for a particular reason. And while they were there, they picked up this amazing set of skills that actually help them look at problems through a different lens. And it misses those things. It misses the mom who took time off. It misses maybe the person who was incarcerated and coming back into the work world, but they had 6 jobs when they were on the inside doing things where they were learning new skills. It might miss a neurodivergent person who's not super interested in writing a fancy resume. They don't care. So there's just all these things that it does in that regard. And so I think that the opportunity to really think more broadly about it is important. And I would also add one more piece, in that I don't think that most systems right now, they're not contextual, right? They're saying that, okay, we're looking for a senior engineer, and we're just making it look like every other senior engineer on the planet. And it doesn't take into consideration the stage or age of your company or what it is that you need to be getting done. And so it sometimes can make the job harder when we're leaning into that. So we need technology that can assist us and getting those processes and thinking through the human parts of our job a little more critically and carefully.
Yeah, we all follow the trends in the marketplace, and we hear so much out there, Martin, especially around the fear mongering on this. And so, can you just set these stakes for us really plainly? What's the legal and regulatory exposure today for a company in the AI hiring space?
Yeah, there is a lot of fear mongering, and it's something that I'm really keen to push back on, because we all know that AI can be transformative and it can be incredible and it can give people a lot fairer access to employment if done responsibly and properly. So I'm all for removing the fear mongering and making sure that people understand that. But yeah, regulatory exposure, there's so much. Like, we're seeing an explosion of regulation globally to do with AI. Over in the US, I say over, obviously you guys are there, but I'm not, I'm in the UK. It's a real patchwork of regulation. We're seeing states coming out with regulation: California, Illinois, Colorado, Connecticut, New York, all coming out with regulation. We're now seeing federal law starting to rear its head. There was a law proposed recently, the No Robot Bosses Act, as well. So we're starting to see a lot happening. But interestingly, we're also hearing about some of the lawsuits that are out there now, and this is where the impact really is. We hear about Workday versus Mobley. We hear about Harper versus Sirius. We hear about Swanson versus IBM and Fold, and now Meta as well in the last couple of days. All of these lawsuits are based on old law. They're based on human rights law, anti-discrimination law, Federal Credit Act, and all those kind of things. So actually the new laws coming out, yes, eventually they'll be tested in court, and that's where we need to start thinking about future exposure. Current exposure right now are in the laws that you've been monitoring and following and making sure that you're compliant with for some time. It's just a whole different methodology. So you make sure that you are compliant with that, because that's where the lawsuits are coming from.
Awesome. Yeah. So Natasha, I know you're kind of looking at this too, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on that, from your perspective on the exposure.
Yeah, the exposure is real. And especially here in the US, we're an incredibly litigious society. And so we need to be thoughtful, and organizations do need to protect themselves as well. They should. But I don't think it should be fear based. I think it should be proactive, right? And so, from my perspective as a service provider or a tool provider, it is incumbent upon me to also take that seriously and to make sure that we are doing good work around building tools that are taking all of those considerations into effect, making sure that we are working with partners. We work with Warden AI, and we do it intentionally because we want to make sure that we're not just saying that we're not being biased, but someone else is checking us and making sure that we are also compliant, so that when we're delivering service, we're delivering a service that our partners can depend on and know that it is auditable. It is not only auditable if you ask me, but that we're proactively auditing ourselves, and we're proactively staying on top of these changes and making sure that we're doing our best to partner with you and protect you. Same goes for it on the other side of that, the candidates who experience our tool. We want them to know that, hey, we're taking your protection very seriously as well. And we're not using information that you have not provided to us. We are not trying to expose you in a negative light. We are doing our best to help you put your best foot forward and to really find the place where you get to do work that you love. And so I think it's really incumbent upon providers to make sure that they are not only being a great partner to the organizations they work with, but also that they're doing their best to protect the candidates who are the ones who are most exposed to the impacts of technology that's not built well or compliantly.
Yeah, and Martin, I'm going to shift back to you, because I had a chat today with somebody actually that was building out this new learning and talent platform, and his claim was, we've removed the bias. And I scratched my head and I said, no, I don't think you did, but tell me more. And I said, that's great. Timing is everything. If a vendor says that your AI is bias free, and I know you're someone that audits these systems, what does that actually mean? And what should the buyer actually hear when that comes up?
Yeah, it's a great question. We hear it all the time. I was at an industry event recently, and there were so many of our vendors there, our industry vendors there, that have that now on their marketing. We are bias free, we're fair hiring, etc., etc. Unfortunately, mathematically, it's actually impossible to be bias free. So I'm sure they don't really appreciate me saying that to them. But when I hear vendors, especially those that are building right now, say that we're bias free, what it tends to mean is that they've put a prompt in where, before anything goes into the large language model, they're saying remove any indicators of gender, of race, of age, etc., etc. That's a great starting point. But bias isn't if woman downgrade, if neurodiverse upgrade, etc., etc. That's not how bias works in these systems. Bias works through what we call proxies. The best example of that was the story of the test recruitment system that Amazon was building, where there was bias towards women because they trained it on their previous hiring data of software engineers. But actually, it wasn't if candidate equals woman, don't give them a job. The system had learned that women can be shown up in different ways, such as I went to a convent school, such as I sang in an all-women's choir, such as all these kind of things. So actually, where we see bias appearing in systems isn't in the direct bias, it's in the indirect bias, or what we call the proxy bias. So actually, those are the questions. The biggest question you need to ask is, can I see a bias audit that shows all your disparate impact, your counterfactuals, all those kind of things that we test for at Warden. A lot of the time, the answer is no, because as far as they're concerned, they're just bias-free, but push for it, because bias isn't direct nowadays.
Yeah, I'm hearing learning and judgment in that answer. And just the fact that it's learning like that, and that does make me a little bit anxious from a practitioner standpoint. And as I shift this conversation, Natasha, now you're using AI to measure human judgment. So what's your responsibility as a vendor to make that fair, make the measurement fair? What should that buyer hold you accountable to?
They should hold us accountable for all of it.
Yeah.
And making
Okay.
sure that throughout the entire process, we are making sure that our algorithms are the algorithms that we're using are not doing things like what Martin was just talking about, that they are not measuring, taking proxy information, using it in that way. But further than that, like the assessment that we include, needs to be bias mitigated for bias, right? We need to have making sure that the outputs that we're putting out are not mitigating for bias every step along the way, whether it is helping to generate the actual job description, whether it is helping to make sure that we are getting alignment around actual skills and not just responsibilities, and being very vague about what someone needs to be able to do to get there. All the way along, we have to make sure that we're doing that. It's in the language that we use. So we do some things, to Martin's point, we're really careful to say that we're not bias free. We mitigate bias as much as we can in the process. And we do that through the algorithm itself, through the technology itself, but also in the way that we use our follow-up questions as a screening interview, right? They're very inclusive. Our assessment itself measures some very powerful things, but it's written at a 5th grade reading level. And it's been tested on all of the groups of folks who might have negative impact, and making sure that it's not a personality assessment, it's actually a skills assessment. And so really being thoughtful and intentional at every step of the process, I think, is important. And then sometimes we also want to make sure that we redact information, because it's not always just one person in the process making a decision, right? So if we have to work with someone where we maybe do have a history of, I don't know how to say that name, I don't want to be uncomfortable, so we just look at the initials, right? We can redact the years that someone went to school, or the logos of the institutions that they learned at or worked at. And it just depends. Every organization is struggling with different things. So being thoughtful about making sure that each stage of the process is supported and we're mitigating bias all along the path is, I think, the best way that we can support our partners in mitigating it as well as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so there's a really good question that came in, and I'm going to try to weave this in. So we're talking about this now and the question's about how transparent should employers be with candidates about where AI is being used in the hiring process. And I know there's a lot of frustration out there in the marketplace, and that question highlights it. So Martin, put that into the back of your head as you're thinking about this, especially from an audit lens. What makes measuring something like critical thinking defensible versus a red flag that you tell a buyer to walk away from? And maybe Natasha, you can add in a response to that question also.
Yeah, it's a great question. When we think about kind of defensibility in AI systems, the biggest there's a mindset shift that has to go on within the TA team, within the recruitment team, and that is the one question that you need to ask when you've implemented and implementing AI is, can I stand behind this decision? Can I explain this decision? Can I stand behind it? Because if you can't, then you've outsourced all that critical thinking to a machine, but you're still liable for it from a regulatory perspective. The machine isn't going to be standing up in court. You are, and your organization is. So that's the one question that changes the entire discipline of a recruitment and talent acquisition team. Can I stand behind this hiring decision? Can I defend it? Can I explain it?
Yeah.
And part of that is, quite rightly, as the question asked, does somebody know when AI is making a decision on me or is helping me make a decision? And actually, that's not just a responsible and ethical thing that you should be doing as part of the process. It's now regulatory as well, There's lots of regulation out there. I mentioned some of them earlier. California last year amended their CCPA regulations to add in things like notification of automated decision systems. So absolutely, you should be putting something up on your, whether it's an email, whether it's on your career page, whether it's in your job adverts, to say exactly when somebody is going to be interacting with an AI system, or an AI system is going to be making a, or helping to make a decision on the outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, +1 on all of that. I would also add, that's what my team says. I go, oh yeah, +1. It's like, that is very convenient. Anyway, I would agree with all of that. I would also say that we have, when we send our follow-up questions, we do ask candidates to opt in. And if they don't want to answer the questions, they don't have to. There's not as much information available to the team, but that's okay. We still think that we're doing a great job of identifying what the candidate is bringing to the table. So we give them that option. We also make sure that, again, our partners are including that language. We ask them to make sure contractually they're obligated to us to make sure that they're including that, whether it's on their careers page or in their job posting or wherever it might be. But then a couple of other things that we do. One, we try to point back to where the information is coming from, and that's getting improved every day. So we are adding more and more of that functionality every month. There's more, so that there is an auditability, and that the recruiter can say, oh, this came from this piece of information that the candidate provided. And so there's always that direct trail. But also, we make sure that in our tool, we're not automatically rejecting anybody. We're not doing that. We're putting the information in the hands of the recruiters to make those decisions, and helping them do the work faster. So they're not having to do more work, but we are giving them the responsibility, because they know their organization infinitely better than I can, right? I can have the best algorithms in the world, but they know the subtleties of their organization. And so we actually take the AI itself out of the black box, and they can change the settings. They can say, this is actually not important for us. This is important for us. And this is how important it is. And I think that level of control, at first, it can be a little overwhelming, right? Like you go, oh my God, this is a Ferrari and I've been driving a Volkswagen Bug over here. I'm not sure I should step into that. But the reality is, like, having that level allows the recruiter to grow and to own more of the process, and to make sure that that auditability, the understandability, and then the reporting back to validate the information is really at their fingertips to be able to do. I think that's super important.
Yeah, so good. Overwhelming stuck in my head when you said that word, because there's so much to this, and I think a lot of organizations probably feel like there's so many things out there. How do they think about it? So, Martin, can you break this down for me? Give me something practical. What are the specific questions a TA leader should put out there before any AI tool goes into the stack?
Yeah, great question. Sorry, I can't get out of my head how unpredictable Herbie is based on your bugs, or Herbie was, even not even is. But yeah, no, great question. And there are so many guides out there, so many lists of questions. It goes back to my whole question around defensibility. The first question you should be asking any vendor is, and a lot of this Natasha was just mentioning as well from their perspective, how do you help me make this defensible? You know, where is the explainability? Where is the transparency? Tell me how the algorithm works. Tell me what data points it makes a decision on. Tell me what data it was trained on. One of the things that a lot of people don't think about is, if you're hiring in a high volume healthcare setting, maybe you're hiring healthcare assistants, it's very high volume, it's very transactional, and you're using an AI system, you want to make sure that system is trained on hiring in that setting, and not hiring for accountants in accountancy firms in the city or something. Where does the data come from? What's it trained on? How are you explaining this? How are you helping me explain this? What risks have you done an impact assessment on your tool? What risks are in this tool? Is it hallucination? Is it rank consistency? Is it model drift? Is it bias? How are you measuring that? How are you mitigating that? There is so many questions to ask, but it comes down to, how are you going to help me defend this tool to my candidates, to my board, and potentially to a court?
Wow. So Let's take this another step further then. And when we think about the hiring risk, who owns that? Like, is it talent? Is it HR? Is it legal? And how should that accountability be structured so it doesn't fall through the cracks?
Yeah, there's no one answer, unfortunately, with this. It all depends on the organization. And I've seen it everywhere from large scale global enterprise who has a centralized governance team or governance committee that's got C-suite, got chief legal officer, CTO, everybody in there, all the way down to the small and medium-sized businesses that Natasha tends to deal with as well in her organization, where they might be a business as usual organization. Most of what they do is very straightforward. There isn't really any kind of high risk AI use cases in that organization apart from recruitment and HR. And what we see there is the HR department, the recruitment team, the TA leadership having to take responsibility. I don't mean legal responsibility, that's always going to be at the top, but responsibility for making sure that governance is front and center and it's important, and pushing that up the chain as well, and making sure that the leadership understand that there's some high risk stuff going on in their department. They've done all the groundwork, but they need the support. So unfortunately, there's no one size fits all, but it's imperative every single time that TA leadership understands what's going into their department, what the risks are, what the governance impact is, and to make sure that they're getting support from other people within the organization.
This feels like getting those fundamentals in place is so important, and having those conversations regularly and make sure that it's up to date and we're checking back regularly. Yeah, go ahead, Natasha. I know you have some thoughts on that also.
I was just going to say that I think that it is everybody. The answer is everybody. And like at the end of the day, to Martin's point, it has to end at the top, right? That responsibility has to be there. But I think everyone who's a part of the process needs to make sure that they weigh in if something doesn't feel right, or if they have a question about something, or if something is working on the opposite side. Hey, this is actually really working, and just want to report back that the outcomes are the ones we're hoping for, right? And I think it matters to the day-to-day user of the tool is going to have a very different perspective and or experience, whether it's them building an agent in Claude or some other program, or it's them using a tool that you've purchased. And so I think everyone along the way has to really be thinking about the impact of what they're doing. And that level of ownership is easier in some organizations. And frankly, small and mid-sized companies might have an advantage there, right? They might be a little bit scared thinking, oh, we're not enterprise. Holy crap, this could get really expensive. It could be really scary. But the reality is like they're so much closer to the use of the technology that if everyone does have that ownership mindset, that they may actually be able to win faster in adopting the right tools and making sure that everyone is really aligned and executing according to the sort of ethical and thoughtful plan that they've put together collectively.
Yeah. So as we come to the end of this and wrap it up, Natasha, a leader wants to do something Monday morning. What's that one small thing, that first thing they should change on to how they screen that moves them towards that skills-based process without, again, ripping out their existing stack?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two answers for this, Bruce, depending on who the person is. The first one is if it is a recruiter that's in the motion day to day, making sure that they're getting aligned with the hiring manager around what does this person actually need to be able to do to deliver on their role, right? Really defining the skills that are required to deliver a role, not so much, or the outcomes, not so much what are necessarily their responsibilities, like backing out of the responsibilities into, okay, so that means I have to be able to do A, B, and C, right? That's what I would say from a recruiter perspective, is getting that alignment on that. From a leadership perspective, and they're thinking about doing skills-based hiring and using AI to do it, I'm going to go back to the first thing that you asked, is you were asking someone about why they were doing a thing. And for me, understanding the what we're doing and the why we're doing it is the most critical foundational piece, because then you can decide on the how and the who, right?
Yeah.
And so if it's the leader that's trying to say, hey, we're going to start doing skills-based hiring, they need to start with the what and why. If it is a person who is doing day to day, who's already gotten the mandate and or the opportunity to start doing skills-based hiring, it is the very simplest first step is that alignment, doing the legwork up front with that hiring manager to make sure we all know what we're looking for, and then we're hiring for that.
Yeah. So Martin, we're going to wrap this up a little bit. And what's that one sentence that pops into your head? What has to be true before they flip the switch for a leader adopting AI?
Yeah, wow. If I summarize it all down, respect and trust. Ultimately, if we're implementing AI, we have to do it with the utmost respect for the people that are at the end of that process, which is the candidates. And we have a trust problem in our industry. We have a major trust problem. We have candidates who we think are all liars and using AI to do horrible things to us. And candidates don't trust us because they think that we're using AI to measure them and reject them rapidly and what have you. So if we can start implementing from a respect perspective and think about how what we're doing is respectful to the candidate, to the time, to the opportunity, and to their future, then maybe we'll start rebuilding the trust that's been broken in our industry.
Yeah, trust is so important. And Natasha, sorry you're nodding. So what's that one thing that has to be true from your perspective?
Yeah, you need to know if you're looking for credentials or capability. And then you're going to make different decisions based on that, right? You're going to decide to use a particular tool or not if you're looking for one thing over the other. So knowing why it is that you're implementing any AI in your organization.
Okay. So we have a question that's live, and I'm going to throw this into the conversation. So I think it's a great question. So if there's time, what are the clearest signs a vendor is truly built for skills-based hiring versus just adding AI on top of keyword matching? Wow. What do you think,
Yeah,
Natasha? Yeah.
that's a great question. I would say that if it is embedded into every piece of the tool, then it's likely that they were building for that from the start, right? If
Okay.
it is a bolt on, this is a new feature that we're adding, my guess is they are using technology to mitigate the things that were baked into the previous process. And
Awesome.
so I would say it's a really clear indicator if they can say that it's in these 9 places, it's in these 22 places, right? Versus, oh yeah, you can see the impact of that here in this one place.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say to that, I think my red flag that would pop up would be if a vendor was saying, oh, we assess the resume for inferred skills. I think that for me is the ultimate red flag when it comes to skills-based hiring, because the way that somebody's put together a resume is not a way of assessing what skills people have. Ultimately, they're taking the resume, they're chucking it into a large language model and saying to the large language model, tell me what skills you can find in this resume. That's not how it works.
Excellent. Yeah, so as we're wrapping this up, I think some of the things I'm actually taking away and thinking about is a way to sequence AI adoption and skills-based hiring is kind of one holistic initiative, not two. The questions asked before adding any AI tool into your hiring stack is so important. A clear picture of skills beyond the technical ones that future-proof the workplace. And then a vendor due diligence checklist that withstands the ELT and legal scrutiny. It feels like something that absolutely, maybe that should be number one. I don't know, but I think that's one of the ones I'm walking away with and thinking about now. Given that, I thank everybody for attending and jumping on this conversation with us today. I hope you gained something out of it, and we look forward to having continuous conversations about this going forward. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.